Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the south-afrifur podcast. You're listening to myself, Ivik Wolf here. We have one hell of a podcast on for this evening. We have a large amount of people here, guests. We're all busy talking about a particular kind of roundtable discussion, something that is very, very close to, I think, our hearts in respect to how we're supposed to be dealing with both coronavirus as well as a myriad of other issues, but this issue, for instance, is a lot more important to us right now, and something that we would love to be able to speak to with the guests that we have here. With Witchy Bunny, is it? I keep forgetting how to say it. Is it Jacoby?
Jacoby, if that's all right.
Teddy and Kayfaye, all members and representatives of the furry fandom, to be able to talk about the kind of issues that we're dealing with, especially now around the world, more internationally than it's definitely grown over the last week, 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, like with the kind of conversations that we've got here, we've got a large amount of stuff to talk about. So pretty much, obviously, Scratch is here to help us out as well. Scratch.
Yo.
And yeah, I see that chat's pretty much also full. So anybody who wants to like ask any questions, things like that, make sure that you put it into chat. We'll speak about it. Otherwise, we're going to have a relatively open conversation around as many issues as we possibly can in the amount of time that we have.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, like if anything, like we're good to go wherever you guys want to go.
Right. Can I put a quick disclaimer in real quick?
Sure.
Okay. So, for the listeners, especially if you're a non-person of color, do not expect us to answer over 400 years worth of questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
If you have like a lot of questions or things like that, like what about this and that? Whoopty whoop whoop. Look, there in the United States, there are things called HBCUs, which are called historically black colleges and universities. You can go to different HBCUs and talk to the historians there. You might even befriend a furry that goes there, and they can give you the rundown, because a lot of our history, especially Black American history, is hidden or probably erased. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
Exactly.
Well said.
Amen.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So
what's going to be the first topic at hand, if you don't mind me asking?
that might be a good question. I think maybe just because there's also a large amount of the contingent, because Furry.fm is actually European based. Maybe a small rundown as to exactly what is being thought about, like what exactly is being spoken about. What is this conversation about, especially to many people who might not necessarily know the nuances of what's actually going on right now.
Okay.
Sure.
Actually, I saw a video yesterday that put it into very stark relief, and it was based on something said by Trevor Noah. And it is that effectively there is a social contract that says if you steal or I steal, that the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation, but the person who is the authority is killing us, and they have broken that social contract. And what's being thought about right now is that the fact that social contract has been broken, and we are pointing that out, and we want that acknowledged. We want people to actually see and understand that we are not being protected by the social contract. We are being killed by it.
Yeah. And just to kind of piggyback on that, at least in America, that social contract has really never existed. Exactly.
Period.
There's a this kind of promise of America that everyone has an equal opportunity to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that everyone is treated the same in the eyes of the law, and that we can point to American history and demonstrate that this has not been the case. at all
Right.
through pretty much all of American history. It's
Yes.
been littered with abuses against minority
Mhm.
people of color, people who just didn't fit the mold. And we've been
Right.
talking about this for, 400 years, since the days of slavery. When slavery was over, you had the whole like Reconstruction of the South, and then
Mhm.
the whole Jim Crow era. People moved north up into like places like Detroit, Baltimore, and like New York to kind of seek better treatment. But what they find there is just a different kind of racism, a different kind of
Mhm.
institutionalized racism. So
Mhm.
it's not better in pretty much any part of the country. And this whole myth of equal opportunity, equal
Mhm.
access is just that, a myth. And we've been speaking up about it for years. Like
Mhm.
that's what the whole
Yeah.
civil rights movement has been about. That's what the whole thing about Freddie Gray has been about Trayvon Martin.
Mhm.
We're focused on the police aspect of it right now, but
Mhm.
if you look everywhere, like business, buying homes, generational wealth, education, there are all these places where we just have not had equal access, and we're tired of talking about it. We want something to be done about it.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Because we usually get dismissed every time we talk about it, or we try to go as a lot of people say, why don't you be more civil instead of angry all the time? It's just like every time we go the civil
Ugh.
route, it gets
Mhm.
dismissed.
Mhm.
So now
Yes.
like we don't have any choice but to be like, fuck your feelings. This is what's going
Yeah.
on. And
Mhm.
also to bring up your point with the Trevor Noah thing, I don't know if you saw the video of this young lady talking about why there's looting, why there's rioting. She compared this situation to playing Monopoly. Like if I play Monopoly with you for 400 rounds, and you told me I can't do anything, I can't make any money, I can't do this and do that. Like I'm probably going to butcher the story. The video's on YouTube, but she pretty much
Mhm.
explained how we've played over 450 rounds of Monopoly, and now you're expecting us to catch up, and you're still doing psychological warfare, like because
Exactly.
we're playing by your own terms. It's just like that's why looting and rioting is happening because we don't own anything, you
Mhm.
know.
No.
So so and then also
Yeah.
I hate bringing Umar Johnson up because he can be very hypocritical. But Umar Johnson also talked about how I hate to say it, I mean how white people be like, well, this minority has come from this country and done this within 5-10 years. How come you can't do it? And then it's just like, well, like you've basically set things up where we can't even get business loans. We can't develop anything.
Yes.
I
Like
have a point to
how
make with that.
yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead because
Me too.
I'm
Yeah.
probably going to look for the links. I'm going to look for the links a little bit later.
Yeah.
It's
So,
fine.
Yeah, witchy.
so
So
Whitney
my
to Redhead. Yeah.
the point I wanted to make with that was that we went off and we built our wealth in Tulsa and Rosemont, and they came
Yes.
in and they tore it down. Black Wall Street.
Yep.
We went, they said go off and do it somewhere else. So we went off and we did it. And we built our own wealth, and we had our own wealthy communities, and we had our own
Yeah.
thing going, and they couldn't stand it. So they went in and they tore it down. So we went off to Rosemont. We did it again. They went in and they killed us. So no,
Yes.
we don't own anything, because when we
No.
do, it's taken from us and we're killed because we're not actually allowed to have anything.
True.
Right. Like
Yeah.
the quote of "we can't have shit" literally goes back generations. Like
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
like it took me till this week because a lot of black people love to say we can't have shit, and it literally dates back generations, and people don't
Yes.
realize it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Right.
yeah. So
And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. To KFA and then.
Oh. Yeah. So yeah, this is so very true um when it comes to how the society, the very society that breaks us over and over again, also tries to pit pit us against each other. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't seem to realize, that the white supremacist patriarchal system also pits different minorities against each other, because my family's from the Caribbean. I'm first generation Jamaican American. And so there's been so many stories about how, and I think Witchy Bunny said this, that these other people come here, why can't the people who have been here for generations do that? And they use that as a tactic to pit minorities against each other, because what will happen is Caribbean people will come here and then will be given certain opportunities, but what people don't realize is that we're still considered a minority, and then shoved into spaces too that we did not have a choice. We were forced into that because we're walking into an oppressive system when we come to this country. So the thing that I like with what has been happening, if there's anything to like, because these past couple of weeks have been, just horrifying. But one of the things that I'm liking is not only the fact that a lot of us people of color, brown and black people, our voices are being amplified, but we're also getting the solidarity that we have been wanting from each other for so long. We've had it over many periods throughout history, and so not only have the structures and the infrastructure been taken from us, but also our solidarity with other people of color has been broken. And I'm liking the fact that, like, for instance, I saw that Asian Twitter literally has been amplifying a lot of Black creatives and have been pointing out we have a history with Black people, and we are we are trying to call out our own anti-Blackness messages and things like that, and calling out our elders and calling out the people and saying, why are you subscribing to this? This is who we need to stand with, because we have been oppressed and hurt and harmed and shoved into places. Because the whole reason why there's a Chinatown in most cities is because that's where they shoved Chinese people into. Chinatown, we love them, and we go there to get things and all of that, but they're literally our ghettos that they shoved Chinese Americans into. So I'm liking the fact that with what has been happening, I'm seeing solidarity and an acknowledgement of history of other minorities reaching out to the Black and brown community and to say, we're here, we're standing with you, this is what's been happening, and we're acknowledging it. And I'm liking that. I'm very, I know there's still more work to do, but I'm pleased by that aspect of all that's been happening.
Like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, speaking to that, just the intersectionality of the current movement has been really heartening to see, not only in Asian communities, like K-pop Twitter, just kind of culture jamming.
Seriously turned out, man.
Yeah, it's great. Like, it's great to see, but also within our own community, in African American or Black social justice circles, we tend to leave our queer Black and brothers and sisters like behind, right?
That's a whole deeper topic right there,
right? But now, like, especially on Twitter, what we're seeing is Black trans lives matter, Black queer lives
Yes.
matter, and
Right.
we're finally not leaving the most vulnerable people in our communities behind just based on
Yes.
their gender expression or sexual orientation. We're taking those
Mhm.
with us. They're part of the fight, and we're embracing them as family, and that's amazing.
Mhm.
That's what makes this different from
You,
other protests for me, is that we're finally
Yes.
being
you
seen.
want to know? You want to know why it's kind of like that now? Like it's starting to be like that is because, well, I hate to say it, but kind of thanks to COVID, where everything is kind of like stopped. People
Yeah.
have the time to look at themselves and look at history.
Yes.
And on top of that, like these people uniting and things like that, and people talking about Black Lives Matter, that develops a whole environment of learning self-love and
Mhm.
self-appreciation, because along with that psychological warfare of like you said of being put in ghettos and being
Mhm.
forced into areas and being compared to other minorities, with Black Americans or Black people in general, it's like with all that psychological stuff going on, being told you're not good enough, your hair is not good enough, you're ugly, and things like that. Lord knows if you're gay, straight, lesbian, or whatever, like no matter your orientation, being told you're not good enough, it develops self-hate to the point you wish you were another
Yes.
race, because I used to be like that, because I didn't know
Mhm.
where I came from. But
Right.
because of this whole Black Lives Matter movement and other people from around the world, it gives you
Mhm.
time to realize that Black people have been the leaders in a lot of things that people just haven't realized. What makes you appreciate yourself, and I love that, because, for example,
Mhm.
um, it's Pride Month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mhm.
so
Yes.
a lot of people don't know about the Stonewall riots, and one of the leaders of Stonewall riots was Marsha P. Johnson, and people
She
Mhm.
was
don't know that
a
Marsha P. Johnson is a person of color,
she was a
Yes.
a trans person
black
of color.
trans woman. She was a
Yeah,
black
Mhm.
trans woman, and that's the thing, is there's a lot of, so historically, and I'm saying this mostly for the people who are in chat because I know that you guys know this. Historically, there has been a movement just kind of within society, not only to break us off from other people of color, but also to break us off within ourselves, through,
Yes.
as an example, hueism, which for those who aren't
Oh
aware of
yeah.
what hueism
colorism.
is,
Yeah,
yep, is where I got as a, growing up as a little girl in Philadelphia, I got
Mhm.
beaten up, I got teased, I got bullied by darker skinned girls
Mhm.
because I was lighter. And by the same token, girls who were lighter skinned than I was were treated better by the teachers, were told that they were
Yes.
prettier, were basically given preferential treatment. And
they got
as
that
Yes.
Teddy
good
was
hair.
saying, yep, it's like, having peas on the back of your head was a terrible thing. You were ashamed of your natural hair. Your hair always had to
Mhm.
be relaxed. Your hair had to be
Yes.
straight. You had to be as white as possible. My mother used to get stopped or used to get, held up on the bus when I was talking to her, as we would be commuting in, me going to school and her going to work, because I didn't sound like a typical black child. I spoke quote
Oh.
unquote proper English. And my mother would
Mm.
be congratulated on the fact that I did
Ah.
not speak African American vernacular English. And this happened on
Oh.
a very regular basis.
Oh.
And this would
Yeah,
be from older black people who had
Oh.
gone through so many years of being
Mhm.
told they were not good enough, of being told that being black was bad. And so the whiter I seemed, the better. And
yep.
Mm.
this defined my entire childhood, to the point
Mm.
where growing up, I was very much I don't see myself as black. I do now, because, and
Mm.
that's taken a lot of
Mm.
self reflection and
Yes.
a lot of work. But growing up,
Ah.
I did not see myself as black,
Mm.
because that meant seeing myself as something that was not good.
Mm.
Right.
So like, that's, I mean, and I think that's how insidious white supremacy is, right? Because,
Yes.
we're bathing in it so much that even our style of speaking, our style of dress, we aim for the default of the dominant culture, right? So
Mhm.
Right.
having that, I speak proper quote unquote English, and like, being praised for that, like, is kind of an example of white supremacy, because what's
Yep.
considered professional, what's considered proper, what's considered polite, that's all based on what the dominant culture thinks. And
Yes.
Right.
while there
Right.
is some need for, like, a shared consensus of what's okay,
Yeah.
we often see ourselves like diminishing ourselves, right? Trying to
Mhm.
hide,
Absolutely.
our culture and the things that are special to us, because we've been told our entire lives that it's not proper.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And that
Right.
is the thing. Growing like here's and I apologize, Teddy. I want to
No,
get
no,
this
you're
point
good.
out real quick.
No, you're good.
Growing up, my mother, who raised me for the first 6 years of my life with my grandmother, so she basically was a single black mother
Mhm.
raising me. She tried very, very hard to make me proud of being a black person. But when I was 6 years old, and I remember this very clearly, she told me, "You have two strikes against you already. The first is that you're black, and the second is that you're a woman. And we're not going to go into the second part, but the first,
Mhm.
because for a
Mhm.
variety of reasons, but the first, the fact that I'm black, the fact that the first thing people see is my skin color, and I effectively grew up ashamed of it. I just tried to ignore it. For me, it was like, oh, it doesn't matter. But
Mhm.
ultimately, that was an expression of white supremacy.
Oh yeah.
Because if I'm not
Mhm.
myself, the only thing I can be is the default. And when the default is white, when it takes years for us to get how many years of Disney did we have before we had a black princess? Before I
Mhm.
had a Disney princess who would have looked like me growing up? How many
Right.
years would it have taken for me to have a show like The Proud Family on
Yes.
TV?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Right.
where you have, different skin colors and different intergenerational relationships of a black family that's not just a stereotypical for laughs. Like we've
Yeah.
come
Right.
a long way, but just this is why representation matters, is because if you're not represented, you're effectively being diminished, and you're learning to diminish who you are to
Yes.
Right.
make others comfortable. And
Right.
that is something we see a lot of, and to bring this back, that's something we see a lot of in the fandom, is that people of color go through and they will go into the fandom. I can go to a convention and see maybe one or two people who look like me, but I have to interact with everybody. And that means
Yes.
I may have to diminish parts of myself that they may find uncomfortable.
Code
Yes.
switching.
Yeah,
That's
like,
that's code switching.
Yeah.
Yep.
yep, that's
Yes.
that's exactly what it is. And like,
Yes.
I mean, I've had so many furry friends kind of tell me, like, I don't think of you as black, or like, you're one of the good
Yeah.
ones,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah. I've heard that.
and genuinely mean it as kind of like a compliment, right? Because like they had, and that's, these are good people. I'm not like trying to call anybody out, get anybody in
No.
trouble, like, but that's kind of the insidiousness of, like, white supremacy, is that
Mhm.
when you've been conditioned to think of black as a certain way. Black people
Yeah.
are always urban, their pants are hanging
Mhm.
down, like that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
in reality, we're a diaspora, right? There are
Yeah.
so many different lifestyles and cultures
Yeah.
and people that make up the black experience in America alone.
Mhm.
And you never really see that through media, right? And
Yeah.
only
Right.
now,
Exactly.
like, recently, are you able to see kind of like the breadth of the black experience. And that's
Yeah.
Right.
that's a, you know, really positive. Like,
It, it's crazy you say that, because I'm going to make another point a little bit later. But I was literally talking to a friend of mine who's a musician as well. He's a white musician, and someone left a comment on one of his posts about this things on he's in total support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And then I noticed the person was making a comment to piss everybody off, and I clicked the post, and it was deleted. And then I was just like, oh man, I was gonna respond, and my friend was like, yeah, I didn't feel like responding to him because I got tired. I'm just like, oh, now you see, you're getting into the peephole of the black experience, because it's
Yeah.
not just being angry all the time, but it's like dealing with people that are like, well, since I don't see it and it's not happening to me, it's not real.
Yeah.
And it's just like so exhausting. And that's why a lot of Black people are like, you know what, fuck it, I'm not going to explain shit. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do what I need to do and get my point across. Which also brings my, if I can go back to earlier, like about representation, it's like with speaking proper and things, like people don't realize there's different types of racism. Like there's the overt, it's a spectrum. There's overt racism, and then there's covert racism. Like I made a whole thread about it on my Twitter. Like it's just like the things that we have to constantly read between the lines, and people don't realize if we dress nice, like if we dress nicely, it's not because we want to look fashionable. It's basically another defense mechanism, so we won't be perceived as a threat. Like there's a I forgot who's the there's a friend of mine put this video up of this WWE wrestler, black WWE wrestler, and he's like, you know, I never realized until now, like all the stuff that my parents made me do, you know, like that I love, is just to be perceived not as a threat. It's just like he got really emotional when it hit him, because it's just like I have a quote that I made that I said, Black people, we only know how to survive. We never learned how to thrive because we've been killed so many times. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Sorry, I went on a whole tangent, but that's like I needed to get that out there, because it's just like we go through so much, and mentally a lot of times we don't realize.
True.
Yep.
So, yeah.
KP, you're up.
Yeah. So like Teddy was saying, that there's such a spectrum of racism and gradations of it. And also a lot of what we have to do as Black people and people of color, where we have to dress a certain way and everything like that. So I did perm my hair. I did relax my hair starting in junior high, and I had that for years.
I was
And
six, just kind of throwing that out there. Please continue.
Yeah. and it's just only now, I believe this is my 3rd year of natural hair. And I noticed that when I started, I'm not gonna name any names or anything like that, but I noticed that a certain person who knew me, non-Black person who knew me for a while now professionally, as soon as I started to wear my natural hair and I started to embrace, you know, being a nerd, where I'm like wearing superhero shirts, things from, you know, fantasy and science fiction, and I started to wear my natural hair, I noticed that this person's attitude started to change towards me, and not for the better. And so it's true, people don't seem to understand that they claim that racism is only this idea of, and I had to say it one time because I remember somebody asked if they asked somebody else, also non-Black, do you believe that the president is a racist? And I had to say out loud, why do people still believe that you have to wear a white hood and ride a horse and burn a cross in front of somebody's house?
Right.
And the person that I was working with at the time, another Black person, started cracking up and almost fell out of their seat. And it just annoyed me, because already this other person had started, the same person who asked this question to another non-Black person was also the same one whose attitude changed towards me when I started to wear my hair natural and I started to embrace who I was. So it's so frustrating, uh, and like the rest of you have said, how exhausting it is to for people to not understand the level of anger and frustration and why people are so angry, and we are, called the stereotypical angry Black person. But if you're just now deciding to wear your hair natural, and you notice that somebody starts to treat you differently in a negative way, and all these other things like, oh, you speak well, and I've been told that most of my life, and after a while, people don't seem to realize these are not compliments, and these are not things that, if unless you have Black skin, you don't, they will not get it. They will not get it, because they will do whatever they want to their look and to their hair, and be complimented or be lauded like it's a trend. And then,
Right.
Black people will be like, well, I'm just going to go back to my natural hair, or like what my family's doing now, or I can't do this anymore because it's too expensive, or it damages my scalp. And all of a sudden now you start to get treated in a more negative, weaponized way, just from
Right.
what does me having to go natural have to do with you now deciding that you're no longer going to treat me remotely professionally? I don't understand it. No, I
Yeah,
understand, but at the same time, it's just ridiculous.
What,
yeah, and
what's,
just
what's,
look at
what's,
like
Sorry, just Witchy, then Jacoby.
Mm.
To
Sorry.
kind of piggyback off of that, in a lot of professional offices and even in the military, natural styles, protective styles, have been banned for years. I think they've only really recently, with like the last decade,
exactly.
opened back up. So you have, like, you couldn't wear your hair in cornrows, you couldn't wear your hair natural, you couldn't wear any way that is natural for Black hair to grow was unacceptable for the military because it was not considered appropriate. And think about
Yes.
that, when the way the hair grows out of your head is considered inappropriate for society.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt Jacob's statement.
No,
But basically, that dates back to the 1700s. To I think it was in southern parts of America, like Louisiana, where
Louisiana, the Tignan
where
laws.
where they made laws where Black women had to be in wraps because their hair was so beautiful that supposedly it made white men want to cheat on their wives. Like,
Yes.
what?
Yes.
Yo.
The Tignan laws.
Sorry,
But
I'm sorry, but this is another instance of, and I don't mean to interrupt, but like, seriously, like, it's not the white person's fault, it's the Black person's fault for existing. Just putting that out there.
right. Yeah. It was just like, oh no, it's not the white person's fault. It's your fault because your hair grows like that, so we need to cover it up. It's your fault. Like,
Yes.
wait,
Yeah.
like, but like, it's funny you mentioned the hair thing because the same people that hate our hair will wear our hairstyles, and
it's a
nobody will bat
trend.
an eye. Yeah,
And our entire culture, everything about us is up for consumption, and that's the real truly frustrating thing. We're not allowed to be ourselves as we are because it's inappropriate for society, but everything about us can be taken and consumerized and made and capitalized on. We do not exist except for others to consume from our hairstyles, from our culture, from who we are, but we cannot exist as we are on our own because that is a threat.
Exactly.
yeah, and just the whole idea of, like, speaking of what you were talking about, Witchy, where, like, there's so many dress codes, like in school, right, where you can't have cornrows, or you can't,
Yes.
have, like, protective headgear, right? Like, oh, no do-rags, like, no scarves of a certain color and that kind of thing. And, we're indoctrinated, like, from early education that, like, black hair is not okay, that black hairstyles are not okay, that our culture is not something that the public wants to see, unless it's
Mhm.
like some trend that,
Yeah,
like,
unless it
an
benefits you.
influencer gets to pick up, right? And
And
it's like the furry fandom, like, just to bring this back around, you see this a lot, right? Especially in, like, in art,
hmm
The
and
dancer furs.
like
Mhm.
and in stories where people will kind of equate furries as like a minority class, kind of like adopt black culture or black history as like oh furry rights or something like that, without really understanding like the historical context and the reality of,
Yes.
of what that means. And it's kind of alienating, I think, to see, even if it's well intentioned, like, and I
hmm
have no doubt that like a lot of these are well intentioned, but seeing that over and over again, where like people are using like your culture and your history and like real life pain and your experience as kind of like a prop,
Yes.
for something that they like kind of want to identify with,
Mhm.
it's othering in its own way, no matter how well intentioned it is. And a lot
Yes.
of people don't really understand, I think, how to interact with our culture, with our history, without kind of stepping in that on that mine, if that makes sense.
I
Right.
mean,
I
the
mean,
issue. I'm sorry,
sorry.
Teddy.
No, go ahead.
The issue in the fandom, unfortunately for us, is that there is so few of us.
Yes.
Like, I think I might be and I hate saying this, and I may be wrong, but at least in the sections of the convention that I inhabit, I do not see very many other Black people who
Mhm.
are helping to staff the convention I work for. I don't see very many. I see them. They are definitely more plentiful now than they were a decade ago.
Yes.
Absolutely, there are more
Definitely.
of us
Yes.
who are here and who are getting into the fandom and who are, more importantly, who are being out and about at conventions and interacting with the community face to face, so that you can see that we are Black, because we
Mhm.
have always been part of the fandom, but we haven't always been face to face, because again, it's easier for people to interact with us, and it's safer for all involved at times if people don't necessarily know that we're Black. But now we're getting
Yeah.
out into the fandom, and now we're getting out into the communities and into fur meets and conventions, but we're still othered. There still are
Yes.
very few of us comparatively to the
Right.
rest of the fandom.
Because the furry fandom is already a minority, and then
Yeah.
a large amount of it is LGBT, which is another minority group. And then when
Mhm.
you're a person of color, that's another minority group. So it's just like if you're a furry LGBT person of color, you're a triple minority. So
You
it's
Yes.
just like
lost the privilege lottery. You
Yes.
lost
Right.
it.
The
exactly
slice of the
right,
pie got smaller.
exactly. Like and and it's just like and then you don't even consider like usually a lot of time um uh, from what I noticed, because I've been in the fandom since, well, I joined the fandom in 2010, so it's coming 10 years
Mhm.
now. And
Mhm.
and like when I like a lot of times when I met a person of color, usually they're mentally conflicted, because the few furs of color I've met early in my uh, experience in furry fandom were like the self-hating type, like
Mm.
you know. So it was
Wow.
just like, dude, like I couldn't. I was just like, dude, like you can be yourself. You don't have to worry about other people. Like it's this fandom is inclusive. And then I started to notice, well, if you try to be yourself as a black person, it's just like it makes people uncomfortable.
Yep.
You
Yes.
know,
Yeah,
so
and speaking to that, because like I came into the fandom in like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm saying this, like 96, right?
Mhm.
So really early, and
Mhm.
you kind of like my experience, I was kind of an outsider on all sides, right? Because I was a
Mhm.
quiet, like skinny, like nerd, you know,
mhm.
Mhm.
uh, I wasn't really accepted in Baltimore City, like, my peer group, right? So like I had to kind of go on the fringes of that. And then when you're like the only Black person in a geek space, that's like its own periphery. And then when you're, queer, that's its own periphery. So like if you grow up, like, and I grew up knowing that I was just this Black geek who was gay, and there's just no place, right, for me. Like I felt like a unicorn, right, just because there was just nobody like me,
Well, to be
for
fair,
a really
Jackie,
long time.
knowing your background and not getting into it on air, but you had a lot to overcome to get to where you were,
Yeah.
just in general.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's othering in and of itself, and coming from that space, you kind of end up starting to be a monolith to the people around you. You are the example.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
It's heavy. It's really heavy because, I mean, like I can point our flaws within our own, within the Black community because it, but then it wraps around white supremacy again, like it's a whole can of worms. But sticking to the whole monolith thing, it's just like, I lost my train of thought. God damn it! But it's sad because when people when white geeks meet people of color, it's usually it's like you said, it's the high chance of you being the only one and them saying I have a Black friend, and then you become the token of that situation. Like it's like as soon as we walk out the door, when you hang out with people that are not you suddenly represent your entire race.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
I hate that because then like when you come back to your own race, you'll be like, oh well, you're not Black because you like anime. You're not. Well, this is like early 2000s, late 90s.
Yes.
Like,
I was
That I
Like,
was
feeling
that
that really hard right now. I feel called out.
I was called an Oreo, like listening
Yep.
for
Yeah.
Oh man, yes.
Yep.
I was called an Oreo. I was called a panda bear
For
listening
those
to,
for those who need an explanation of the Oreo comment.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
people thought like being a musician, like I knew some history of music, so I was just like, oh, so Black people created rock music, so I started listening to a lot more rock music, and I was getting made fun of by my Black peers saying, oh, why are you listening to that white music? I'm like, bitch, have you heard of Jimi Hendrix? Like, have you heard? Like, I shut them down, and then it's like it started when I started wearing Vans. When I started wearing Vans, they were like, "Yo, like, what are those? Like, why are you wearing those? Like,
What are those?
Oh my
what are
goodness.
those?" Like, and then I had to explain to my friends, like, "Yo, like, we are the trendsetters. Like, you don't understand, Like, if I didn't know like my little bit of history back in high school, like, I would be screwed, like, or even going back to like middle school or elementary school, like the fact that like thanks to music I knew what was going on, but I just wasn't aware of the whole self-hate thing. I was just correcting people, just checking like that's like we are not a monolith, but we become a monolith by default depending on the
structure.
Yeah. And the thing is, we become a monolith to either side. Like, I also grew up being called an Oreo, which for those in chat who don't know means Black on the outside, white on the inside, which is what that is what that particular thing means. And I had quote unquote non-Black interests. I was interested in Japanese and anime. I was not interested in rap. I was called by the other kids in my block a wannabe white bitch, and I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. My elementary school was a predominantly Black school, so I got these in spades, and I was othered because I wasn't quote unquote Black enough. And the problem with that is when you are defining blackness by by it
Interest.
being the counter to the mainstream, which is what it is defined as, and what it was definitely defined as in the 80s and 90s. You know, you kind of run into this: you're either not enough or you're too much. And in the furry
Yeah.
fandom, it kind of gets amplified, especially
Even more.
if you're the only black person that someone knows,
Yeah.
then everything becomes okay. I have a question, and I don't mind answering those questions for the record. But at the same time, that in itself is a function of it's kind of uttering in its own way, because
Yeah.
you now are the one who has to explain this, and it's not a bad thing, but it's ultimately a matter of white supremacy, because if white supremacy weren't so much of a thing, you wouldn't have to explain this. It would be
No.
Right.
knowledge.
That's why I made the disclaimer in the beginning of this. Because like people might like try to other just based on this whole interview. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
They will.
Yeah.
yeah.
They're
Yeah. Sorry.
So-
I know that I'm going to interject by telling, yeah, hey Faye, it's your
Yeah.
turn. You can go.
This is great because it also brings up a lot of things that that some of us I'm not trying to speak for the rest of the panel, but at least for me, these experiences are suppressed over time because they're so painful. And I remember in junior, I come from a family where we love comic books, we love geek culture and things like that, and for that I feel grateful. But I remember when I was in middle school, I couldn't find anyone who was into comic books. The only people that I could hang out with that were into that were the white boys. So so this is and also by the way I talked, a lot of the other black kids did not want to hang out with me. And I was bullied by both, black and Hispanic students. So I found out that when the white kids, especially the boys who were into comics, then I hung out with them. And then I started to get harassed by the white girls and even by black girls too, to the point where they were questioning my sexuality and things like that, because they only saw me with guys and also with just white guys. But that's who I could hang out with and who wouldn't judge me for liking comic books. And then it progressed when I got into anime and things like that. And I don't know, I'm just gonna age myself where I remember watching Osamu Tezuka, the one that they call the god of manga and the father of anime, who I was watching his stuff in the 80s as a little kid, and they didn't call it anime yet. They just said these were cartoons from Japan. So now, speed to the 90s, when I started to get into more anime and more manga and things like that, when they also started to make it more available. So by then I had already, I believe I had already graduated from high school at community college. And I remember talking with an old friend who we're not really friends anymore, who said to me, I didn't know you were into all of these things. And I said, yes, because if I did let you know, because they also happen to be black too, you would not have accepted me. And I had to, and they even said, oh, because you wanted to fit in. And I was like, yes. So, so it a lot of these stories, especially when I started going to conventions in 2000, and I remember going with a friend at the time, and they when we got there, so this was I believe this was MegaCon, and it was 2000. It was my very first convention, and theirs as well. And I remember going there, and we were in the hotel lobby because they were using the hotel center as the place for where the convention would be. But we went to the lobby, and we then went to one of the side tables to see if we could get a snack. And it was two older Black women who were running that like lunch table. And all of a sudden, when they saw me and my friend, one of the ladies turned to her coworker and said, "You have to come here. Our people are at this convention." And they said that all they saw until me and my friend showed up were all these white kids. So they thought that anime was just for white people. So when my friend and I showed up, they were like, our people are in this too? And we were like, yes, there are Black anime people. And they were just like so like in love and saying, this is wonderful, because we thought that we weren't part of this. But then once they saw, young people, young Black people, they were like, oh, great. So it's all of these, it's a lot of these things. It's so many of these experiences, which is why I turned into a blogger years ago. So I can just blog about this, regurgitate it, because it's just so many things that after you go into retrospect, you start to say, wait a minute, this is what happened to me. This was a part of the culture of slicing, of white supremacy saying this is the pie and these are the slices, and the more intersections that you occupy as a Black person, the slice gets smaller and smaller. So it's just so it's both good that I'm hearing the rest of the panel, but as well as it's also I'm saying, wow, this is really, people don't seem to understand how hard that is to, you have to compartmentalize these experiences and put them into perspective and look at them in hindsight, because then it's so troubling and so exhausting, to look back on.
Right. And just to jump in really quick, like it's kind of a revelation to me to know that so many of you have had the same experience that I had coming out, where you were kind of like progressively like rejected from like various spaces on the basis of being othered. And it's sad. Like, I'm sorry that you all had to go through that, but it also helps me feel less alone, knowing that oh my goodness, other Black people in the fandom have had this exact experience. Like, this is a common thing.
Because I'm starting to notice a pattern. It's like if it's a trend that a lot of us haven't, if it's a trend that we haven't started, or if it's a trend that something that is majority white has picked up on it. And I do apologize if you hear noise in the background because my dad is like mowing the lawn right now. But like I noticed when Blacks pick up on trends that where the majority of the trend is basically white, and you become other, you become instantly other, which is when you look at it, it's somewhat of a defense mechanism in a way, but it's just like if it's part of a creative art and it's actually from a non-white country, then it shouldn't be an issue, and like especially like the fact that again a lot of other people from other countries consume our trends, and one culture that consumes our trends heavily are people from Japan and different parts of Asia. So but then again, a lot, like I said, that's something where that's an observation where you have to know how to thrive. We just
Yes.
react out of everything from instinct and survival. So well, that's just my opinion, but that's
Mhm.
what I've noticed. Like that, we become other when we become part of a trend that's not black, which is just a whole
Yeah.
different topic within itself. Because that's a whole like what we're talking about is like a whole can of worms within a
Mhm.
can of worms. So like I told a friend of mine who's also another artist in the fan, like for you to come to me to want to talk about these issues, I appreciate it, but like for you and me, it's like going into the dark to find a can of worms, and then to find that can of worm and stick our hands in that can of worms to find different various answers. And the reason why I said we're in the dark is because a lot of what we're going through is usually suppressed or hidden. So we're just in the dark a lot.
Yep.
Mhm.
Might as well call us moles, man. So, so
Okay.
yeah.
All right, Keife.
Yeah, Kefe, if you want to continue, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, and the thing is, it what I'm enjoying with being a furry is that I didn't actively look for this. I didn't know. Funny thing is that even though I have written and drawn this stuff all of my life, I didn't know about the furry fandom until like the late 90s. And it brought me in because it was one of the I believe it's one of the only fandoms that literally found me. And I say this a lot of times in a lot of my media where I have said this in past interviews. I've said this on other podcasts, and I've said it many times on my blog, where it's all the other fandoms I got into because of either peer pressure or because I saw that there was already a group that I could hang out with in order to consume it. But furry was something that I felt found me and then brought me in because I didn't even know it existed. I had when people read my stuff and they see my artwork and other furries treat me as if I was always in the fandom, always a part of it and everything like that. And that makes me feel good, but at the same time, a lot of them don't realize that I really knew nothing about it. I went into it cold. And once I realized that this fandom existed is when I then start to do my research and talk to other people of the fandom in order to figure out what this was, because it embraced me.
Mhm.
And it's like a lot of the things that I was trying to figure out about why do I like this kind of media, why do I read these kinds of books, why do I seem to identify so much with even as an animal lover, and to realize that being bullied in school made me made me retreat more into hanging around animals and being around other people's pets because human beings were so awful to me.
Yeah.
So it was so funny because growing up I would go to friends' houses, and it didn't matter whether they had a parrot or a dog or a cat. It's like the animal and I just bonded. And a lot of times friends have told me, oh my goodness, so and so does not like when visitors come. Why do they like you so much? And I'm just like, oh, I guess they can tell that I'm a good soul, but I don't know. But
Yeah.
so it's one of those things that I know that there's not there's a lot more of us Black people in these fandoms, and more, and I know that um depending on where we are, we may be like the monolith or the icon or the token, but at the same time I feel that with this fandom there was something for me that I can also not feel so awkward and alone, because of the fact that when I met other furries, they also weren't just furries. They were into anime, they were into manga, they were into K-pop, that sort of thing. So all of the other things that I was into, once I got into this fandom, then I started to meet people who were also into those other things as well. So it helped me to have a conversation with myself and to, you know, understand who I was. And also it even made me more aware of it wasn't the be all end all of things, but the furry fandom was one of the many things that also helped me to get back into touch, not only as a Black person, but also as a Caribbean American, as well as to understand more history, because the furries that I was also meeting, a lot of them were also either armchair historians or actual academic historians who knew history and who knew things that were happening. And so then that made me get more in touch with Black history as well. So, you know, I just wanted to put that out there, that I am able to understand more of who we are and how we are placed in this history because of the interest that we've had and the hobbies and things that we have been into, you know, over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I want to speak on that because I think you're exactly right. Like one of the things that furry has allowed me to do is kind of get to know myself, I think, a lot better. I mean, like one of the great things about the furry fandom, I mean, you know, even though we're here to kind of like talk about places where it can be improved, is that it's so welcoming and so open, and it's such a big fandom that no matter what your interests, you can find furries who are into that as well. Like, you know, you just look at like con schedules for big cons. You have like furry ham radio operators, or like, you know, designers, writers, creators of all stripes, people who are, you know, furry doctors, people who are, you know, furry clergy. So you can find a home for yourself in furry, no matter, you know, what you're into. And I've always liked that aspect of the fandom, and that allowed me to kind of, you know, get back into things that I had like long neglected, and also to reabsorb furry into like my self construct. So like a lot of the writing, you know, that I'm doing now is kind of figuring out my place, not just in society, but in the Black community through furry. And
Right.
it's a great tool for that. It really is.
Yes.
So
like it's like that's like I definitely feel you both definitely on that aspect, you know. But like I'm not good with names, but someone mentioned, you know, we're talking on things that the fandom can improve on. One thing that they definitely need to improve on is like when it comes to topics that are going on now, like especially this, like there should be no like ooh, I only talk about furry and not politics.
Oh my god. Okay.
Like
Finally getting into it. Let's go.
Okay.
True.
Here we go.
Like, yeah. So like there was a certain
Switching
bird.
gears.
Yeah, we're switching
Call
gears
out
right now.
species though.
Huh?
Why are you gonna call out the species though?
No, but because it was a super horrible tone deaf take. That
Yes.
so it was so bad that I can say it was a certain bird, and it's not too Griffin. Thank God it wasn't. But it was a certain bird that went down to the protest in fursuit, saying, "You guys might get agitated for me not using my platform, but furry is my escape, and I don't want to talk about." I'm just like, bro, like
Oh my God.
you could take the time to talk about ALS and go on the and go on the dog bomb march, which is a wonderful thing.
Oh
But
yeah,
but the fact
nothing
that you
against dog bomb.
consider the fact that you consider human rights as politics, like, and I don't think he realized that he considered human rights as politics. It's just
And here's the
fact,
thing.
yeah.
No, like the thing about that is, and that's for a lot of people. A lot of people in the fandom dismiss a lot of the BLM stuff as, oh, it's drama or it's politics, or let's keep politics out of the furry fandom. It is really easy to define something as politics when your skin is not the one that's in the game.
Or your
Yes.
orientation.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
When you can turn around and hide your orientation, you can turn around and people look at you and they don't make instant assumptions about what type of music you listen to, about the type of person you are, about how smart you are.
Yep.
We cannot stop being Black. It
Yeah.
is the first thing people see. This is politics to some people. This is our lives.
Lives.
This isn't just politics. This is literally our lives. And that is why it cannot be pulled out of the furry fandom, because we
No.
are furries, we're in the fandom, and this is our lives. This is part of who we are. And by saying
True.
let's keep politics out of the furry fandom, it's basically saying I'm not interested in discussing anything that is impactful to you because it inconveniences me and inconveniences my good time.
Right.
That's exactly right. And like,
sorry.
oh, sorry. So I was just gonna say, like, I mean, if you want to know, like, what white privilege is, I mean, those statements come from a position of privilege, right? Because you
True.
actually have the privilege to opt out of those conversations, to not notice what's going on. But like, we don't. Like, when we see the news and we see like Black people getting brutalized by the police, when we see like our, people, like our family basically, dying at the hands of police or like getting abused at protests, that affects us. We can't opt out of that because that actually affects us. Like, any
Like-
interaction with the police that I have, like, I know that I could die, right? Like, and I can't escape that. Like, it's nice that you can escape the reality of that situation by like going in the furry, but that's a function of your privilege, right? Like, you have
It's
the privilege
literally
to
a
do
fact
that,
of
and we
life for
don't.
those of us who are Black.
Yeah.
Is that if we interact with the police, we may die. This isn't a we may get a fine. This isn't a we may go to jail. This isn't a we
get
may
a
lose our
ticket.
license or get a ticket. We may lose our life.
Our life.
Period. And
This isn't a compliance thing at all.
no, it's not. And it's not like, and here's the thing. One of the men who was, I wish I could remember his name, David Atty, I think it was, but one of the men in Louisville who used to feed police for free. Black man owned his own restaurant, fed police for free, and they shot him dead.
Yes, they did. Yes, I saw that on the news. Yeah,
They
and
shot
when I
him
heard
dead.
he was like a like what they would call back in the old days a pillar of the community. Like everybody knew him. He was supporting so many social structures in that community. And then when I heard that they shot him, I was like, wait, what is this?
And not only did they shoot him dead, they left his body in the street for 12 hours.
Yep.
Which is an additional
Michael Brown all over again.
Yep, it's an additional disrespect. Not only do you disrespect the person, you disrespect them in death, you disrespect their corpse.
But also, like, that was something that they would used to do with lynchings, right?
Exactly.
Like, and other,
It's
like,
a warning.
kind of extrajudicial, like, killing of Black people across the South. Like, historically, they would just leave Black bodies right out there because they wanted everyone to see what happens when you cross white people. And so
Yeah.
like that, that sends a message. And it's not just like, David McAddy, like who, I mean, like, lost his life, but we're seeing like black politicians, getting brutalized by the police just for
Yeah.
protesting. We see all
Yeah.
these, like, it doesn't matter if you're like a district attorney or
No.
or an
Senator.
actor or
Yeah.
or a senator or
He's a
anything. Like,
senator and
being
still
black is cause enough for a lot of police officers to just start stuff with you.
exactly.
And what's
There's
crazy is like, I made a point within a thread on Twitter saying like, okay, furries, you don't want to talk about black issues, but being LGBT is political as well. But here's the thing, here's the difference is like, I might be part of the LGBT community, I might be furry, but you can hide that. I can't hide my skin color.
Thank
I
you.
can't,
Exactly.
I had that.
can't
Mhm.
hide that.
I had that conversation with where I was talking about the issues that affect the Black community, and I had a peer say, "Well, I happen to be a lesbian," and another peer who was an ally jumped in and said, "Yes, but you can hide that. People, you're not walking around with that on your forehead. It's not your skin color to say that somebody's going to look at you and say, oh, she's gay, but they'll look at me now and say, we know she's Black." So the tone deafness that I keep hearing from people, where I hear people say, well, I'm colorblind, and I'm like, well, then you don't see me.
Yep,
And
exactly.
and I'm like, you can't say you're colorblind, because then you have now erased all of the experiences that I've gone through that you haven't, and to understand where I'm coming from. When you say to me, what I was told that by someone that I respect and I considered a friend, and I said, well, then when you say that, now you have erased my experiences of walking into an elevator and seeing an elderly white woman clutch her purse, and you know or move, and or even a younger white woman move to the corner of the elevator, even if when I'm in the elevator and they don't feel threatened by me because they see that I'm a woman, but then at the same time, now when a Black man or walks in, or a Black boy, then suddenly now that they shift to that. So it angers me so much to keep hearing people say these talking points about leave the politics out of it. I'm colorblind. We're all colorblind, and I'm like, well, when everybody's blind, then what happens, right?
Right.
Right.
It was so it 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 I have been having to argue and fight on social media to let people know, why do you keep talking about property? Why do you keep talking about building structures? Why do you keep talking about monuments that you may not even know this were built in order to, it wasn't built in honor of, but to intimidate a community once that community started to become successful. And
Those were all built during the civil rights era. Every
yeah,
last one of them.
exactly. And we all know this, but to the listeners, I'm talking about the Confederate statues and the monuments. So all of these people don't, when you've had people telling you, when you've had Black people telling you, you do realize this is what's happening, and then you're and even those who claim to be allies or claim to be friends and loved ones, and you're telling them this, and then they say to you, oh, but we don't want to talk about that now, or they bring up something about them that may cross your intersectionality, but then they're still protected by whiteness. So it's so frustrating and I keep telling, and I've been saying to people on social media, you still care about the property now? You still care about the property now? Or do you care about people's lives? And people somebody said on one of the news stations where they basically said, you're talking about people looting and burning down the store, and yet the people in that community may not even have as we said earlier, skin in the game. In that they are being paid $7.20. The person said they're being paid $77.25 an hour. They don't have health care. They don't have the proper stores or the mental health or the social work community to help them. And then you get angry once a riot happens, because it's the voice of the unheard, according to Dr. King, that, oh, why are you burning down your own community? It isn't. A lot of people don't seem to realize that it's not the community. Yes, there are some in the community that do own some of these things, but it's such a small. In other words, you will have that community of all these stores, and probably one person actually owns all of that, and the rest of the community just shops there or consumes the items. They don't have any skin in the game in that.
Right.
So
That's
when you
absolutely true.
when you see people burn these places down, and everybody keeps telling me, well, that's not a good tactic. No, you don't understand. If it's gotten to that point, that means people have gotten tired of going the legal route, going through state official channels, going through local government. They've done everything. They even did the peaceful protest, and you still wish to oppress. You still wish to hurt. You still militarize the police in that area, and next door the majority white area is not militarized, and then suddenly now you want to worry about them burning down this property and this place.
Yeah,
I'm
and
going
so
to
like,
actually.
and that's
Go on, Ivy.
Oh no.
I wanted
Richie,
to.
you've got the hand,
Yeah.
so go for it.
I wanted to address a point that actually just came up in chat, which is that's the thing. A riot is not a protest. Burning and stealing is wrong. A protest works differently. You hurt your own community when you do a riot. A couple of things about that for this particular situation. Number one, the people creating the riots are not the protesters. It's the police. And I want to get that straight.
Yeah,
The
that's where I want
police
to
are
go
the
to with
ones
this.
escalating this. The police are the ones who are inciting violence. The police are the ones who are rioting, not us.
Mhm.
Number two.
Police and hidden white supremacists.
Exactly. Number two, to go back to the point of what was being said, if we don't own anything, if it's not ours, if the social contract that says, that says they're supposed to fix things and they're supposed to, make sure everything's okay. If the people in authority who are supposed to fix things are killing us and we don't own anything and we've never been allowed to own anything, why should we care if Target burns? It's not ours. It's never been ours. The social contract has been broken and we don't care because they don't let us have anything. So it is a protest because everything that we got, everything that we built was taken from us. Why should we care at this point about, and I'm going to say this and I apologize, why should we care about white property if they don't care about Black lives?
Yes.
And that's exactly. And like, that's the thing. I think a lot of people don't understand what's happening in a lot of these communities because, we aren't allowed to own anything. Right. And when, there are like mom and pop stores like in the neighborhood, like corner stores or whatever. And when Target moves into these neighborhoods, they shut all of those down. So like, that's actually hurting Black business. right? So then we're forced to go into Target. We're forced to deal with people who view us with suspicion, who follow us around the stores, who think that we're stealing stuff. We are forced to go into these neighborhoods where police are like, well, a black person doesn't belong here. Let me check on what they're doing, like that kind of thing. And you can only take so much of that, right? At some point, when you see your entire neighborhood being gentrified and all that money that's being built on that gentrification is not going back into your community, right?
Nope.
There are still boarded up houses. There are still people who are unemployed. There are still people who are underpaid. There are still moms who have to work like 2 or 3 jobs, right?
Yeah.
And the system exploits the people in those neighborhoods and doesn't give anything back to them.
No.
And anytime we try to climb out of those neighborhoods, anytime we try to make something better for ourselves, we're told in many ways, big or small, that we don't belong there. Like I've been randomly selected at the airport for to have my bag searched. I've been randomly selected at like wrestling shows. Like I've gone to a pro wrestling show with a white friend. White friend goes through, no problem. They stop me and check my stuff. Right. And that all that tells us is that like you don't belong. You don't belong. You don't belong here. This is not for you. And when this happens in our own neighborhoods, and like, if we're trying to get like black businesses started, right? Do you know how hard it is for a black person to get a small business loan in America? Do you know how hard it is for a black person to get a home loan in America?
Oh God.
Have you heard about redlining? Right? Like that's the thing.
The banks are some of the worst like they would call robber barons of the black community. Yeah.
Right. And so like that's the thing, is that like we are not allowed to have anything. And the stuff that is in our stores is not owned by black people. And we can't even be safe in the few places where we're allowed to go, or we're viewed with suspicion. In the few places we're allowed to go, like our neighborhoods are fine, right? Like our neighborhoods are fine. We don't burn down our own. If you see a lot of these places, there's been long-standing issues with these places, where they have been, antagonize the community or something like that. And I'm not saying that anyone deserves to have like their, their businesses burned down. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is there's a reason for it. It's not just random looting. And the fact that we have to spend so much time talking about that, and the fact that it's property damage, instead of the fact that police have been killing black people for decades, and that we're finally fed up with it and we've had enough of it, that tells you something. Why are we wasting time talking about property when there are people dying in the streets? There are people who are friendly to the police and being shot and then left in the street for 12 hours.
Yes.
How come that isn't talked about nearly as much as burning down a Target?
Yes.
How
that's
come
the
that
point.
isn't seen as important?
You want to know? You want to know how people dismiss all that was just been said? You want to know how they dismiss it? Well, what about black on black crime?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Oh my goodness.
My response to that, I mean, I could respond to that, but my response to that is, well, if you could stop killing us, we could actually concentrate on our own communities, because white on white crime happens, Latino on Latino crime happens, Asian on Asian crime happens. It's called proximity crime. But the thing is, like, someone talked about how, like, when the police get sent to poor communities, white or black, the police get sent to black communities more than white poor communities. And then once they start graphing out, what crime happens more. Of course, the more policed area is going to get more crime.
Yeah.
People don't realize that, because they constantly dismiss and say, "What about concentrating on your own community?" It's just it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know.
Mhm.
Right,
So,
and that's the thing
Yeah.
is that like if police are like going to be in one place over another, of course they're going to report more crime. Like you see
Yes.
this all the time in like drug convictions. You see this all the time in like even like armed crime. Like how many white armed terrorists who've like just I just came out of a movie theater or a church and I just killed like a dozen people. Like they don't get
Being
shot
They walked
with a
out.
gun. Like they
They
have a gun.
walked out.
oh yeah,
They
let's
get to
go
go
to
to
Burger
Burger
King
King,
right afterwards.
right?
They bought,
Yeah.
they
Right.
bought the McDonald's and fed them, and then put a bulletproof vest on them,
And
even though
that's one
they're
of
the
the
ones
reasons,
that did the murdering. Yeah.
right? And that's one of the reasons why like defunding the police has really caught on, because policing is not the answer to black on black crime. When you put a
No.
whole bunch of people and you trap them in a poor neighborhood where they don't have anything, of course people are going to fight over scraps. And that's what's
Yes.
happening. There's the only way that you can get out of these neighborhoods, succeed in the neighborhoods, is by being an athlete or
Mhm.
being a
A
rap star, a
musician.
musician,
Mhm.
or dealing drugs, right? Like a lot
Yeah.
of people,
very lucky and
right,
getting out of there via the academic route, and that is
right,
Yeah.
very
exactly,
lucky.
right, and then we won't even get into like the underfunding of schools, right? Like
Hmm.
Yes.
Right.
because schools are tied to property taxes and black people are only allowed to live in certain areas that have very, very low property taxes or property
Yep.
values, and
Hmm.
are where all the areas of urban blight are, they don't get funding for schools. So there
No.
are black people who are coming up in like in Baltimore, right? Like during
Mhm.
the last winter, Baltimore City Public Schools did not have enough to turn the heat on,
Nope.
Yeah,
right?
Kids
they
So
had
were
to
in
bring
like
there in
space
their
heaters.
jackets.
A
They were
couple
in
right,
years
their
so
back.
like
jackets trying to learn.
so there are
Yeah.
kids in Baltimore City like who have to wear winter clothing all day long, freeze, and then try to learn something on outdated textbooks with no
Yeah.
computers, right?
Mhm.
And it's like this is what we talk about when we talk about systemic. If you
Yeah.
defund the police and you say, all right, policing isn't working, let's stop giving them money, let's put money back into education, let's put money back into building up homes, let's put money back into giving black people business loans and home loans so that they can actually build up their
Yes.
communities.
Right.
And when
And
people actually have stuff that they're proud of and they built something with their
they take
two bare
care of
hands,
it.
they take care of it, right?
It-
So like
Mhm.
there there there's two points I'll make quick. And I'm glad that they're finally saying this on TV. But I have been saying for years that the police system in this country was based on catching slaves.
Slave
Hmm.
patrol.
And
Yes.
when the country changed, or at least evolved in certain ways or progressed in certain ways, I keep telling my students the police system as we know it did not. And this is where so many of these problems come in, because the police are still catching slaves, and I'm quoting my fingers. So how do you expect people to be appropriate law enforcement when the very foundation of it was not changed from what it was before, when it was to catch slaves, and now those slaves are free?
right.
And and it's going to still, in other words, the attitudes, the policies, and everything like that. The other point I wanted to make also was is the fact that they a lot of people are angry about people saying either abolish the police or defund them. And a lot of people who study how the police work, especially the ones that are keeping up the database about police violence and things like that, and they found out that even in places where they want they want more police, not only did not only and I know we made that point a while ago that the crime and everything goes up, but even when it's when the police are removed now, or when there's a smaller group of police, there's actually now less crime. And that's because the people are not being oppressed, the people are not being bullied, they're not being and somebody, oh my goodness, and some people are just awful, where they say, well, if you get rid of the police, then what are you going to do if someone rapes you or murders someone? And then somebody said, well, here is all the statistics of the police not helping people who have been raped, people who have been sexually assaulted, or when people have been murdered. There's so many cold cases that the police just put in a box and put it in some storage, and they never solve the crime. So it in other words, you have the people who are angry that people are saying defund the police, and then they want to say, well, what happens when if you get murdered or you get raped? And then people are saying, but guess what? People are getting raped and murdered, and the police are doing absolutely nothing. And especially more so in the Black and brown communities. Yeah.
If I may.
And
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
So weirdly enough, and I mean, being from South Africa, and I guess this is going to be the only takeaway that I have, but like, one of the major issues that we have here is that when it comes to inequality and the kind of issues that we're currently talking about, from somewhere like South Africa, a lot of people think, okay, well, these issues won't happen as much here. In fact, like, I was looking at statistics just the other day that was talking about the fact that, like, police brutality in South Africa is actually on a higher level. Like, we're talking about, like, percentage-wise, like, person-on-person, like, sort of attacks in that particular manner do happen. I've personally seen it as, a person who's white. I've been able to get away with things that I really should never have gotten away with. We're talking about drunk driving. We're talking about a whole bunch of things that now, because I was younger, it was fine. But my life as a youth, as a white youth at the time, didn't need to have that problem, didn't need to have that charge against my name.
Yes.
At that point, I was let go after a couple of, like, crying fits and, that kind of thing. So, I mean, like, looking back at that kind of sort of perspective, looking back at what I got away with and what little I actually had to do to get away with it, that's part and parcel of this kind of argument that we've got to start making. How come I can get away with something like that when people who are pretty much on the same level as I am in respect to wherever we've come from, anything like that, the neighborhood that we come from, how is it the person who lives next to me gets locked up and I don't? Just based off of my skin color.
Oh yeah, I've seen videos, and I wish I could remember this particular professor's name. But there's a professor who, in his 70s and 80s and on, was teaching classes about systemic racism and about racism in general.
Jane Elliott?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Jane Elliott.
Jane Elliott. And so one of the things she said to a white class, and she said, if any of you want to be treated the way Black people are treated in this country, please stand up. And no one stood up. And she goes, maybe you didn't hear me. If any of you wants to be treated the way Black people in this country are treated, stand up. And again, no one stand up. And she said, nobody's standing up. That says to me very clearly that you see what's going on, you see what's happening, and you don't want it for you. I want to know why you're willing to let it happen to somebody else.
So
she was also. I think she was also the one that did the brown-eyed, blue-eyed.
She is in fact exactly the person who did that same
yes.
exercise.
And people need to read that. They need to read that. Yeah.
I just want to ask for, sorry, I just want to ask for context here. Brock Turner and Ethan Couch.
Brock Turner. Brock Turner is the swimmer.
I almost forgot about them, and that's because people went through lengths to cover that up.
Brock Turner is the swimmer who raped an unconscious woman behind a
that
dumpster,
dickhead.
and
Ethan
and
Couch, drunk driving,
yes,
killed 4 people
he was the
and
influenza.
injured 9.
He was the influenza defense, as I recall, or excuse me, affluenza.
Affluenza.
Affluenza,
defense.
yes.
Both of them have affluenza, supposedly. I think that's just a term rich white people made up, just to.
They did for his defense.
Yeah.
And like,
Alright, okay.
and that's the thing, is that like there are people who, like, what was George Floyd arrested for, right? Like a counterfeit 20.
Yeah.
What was Eric Garner?
It hasn't even been proven that 20 was counterfeit.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. But like just a suspicion, right? Like Eric Garner, cigarettes, right? Like selling
Taylor
cigarettes.
Rice didn't even stop the car before they killed him.
Right.
Yeah.
12-year-old boy playing with a toy gun in a park. They were still
Tamir
moving
Rice.
when they shot him dead.
Tamir Rice. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. 12 years old.
Like, and like Trayvon Martin, just like on the suspicion of like, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like,
Pablo Castro, who legally owned a gun, was a member of the NRA and who got shot in front of his girlfriend and daughter. Mind you.
Yeah.
Right. And like, so like there are all these like examples in the criminal justice system of people who are white getting off on really, really horrible things, right? And Black people just don't get that same benefit of the doubt. Like,
Nope.
I think Brock Turner, they were like, oh, he's such a promising, he has such a promising future ahead of him, and like he just made a mistake, and like,
so did everybody else.
Right. And that's the thing. And to bring it back around to furry, right? Like that's one of the things that really upsets me about when people are kind of being called out for racism. Like folks jump to their defense, right? And say like, oh, they made a mistake, or like, that's not them, or like that kind of thing. But like this is the same kind of impulse that gives people like Brock Turner a pass, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's all connected, right? And so like I don't get that same benefit of the doubt, and a lot of
what's funny is when you do a crime or something similar like that and you're a person of color, you don't get a second chance in anything. Period.
No.
Like you can be Black and very successful. And then if you fuck up, that's it. Like you're done.
About that is why President Obama had to be impeccable. He wore a tan suit and was pilloried. And was absolutely just completely pilloried. If he had done any one thing that our current president has done, he would have been impeached and out of there so fast. He would still have a spinning shoe in the middle of the Oval Office, like in a cartoon.
Yeah.
Right. Can you imagine like an Access Hollywood style tape of Obama saying the stuff that he said, like that Trump said, like against women? Can you imagine Obama like starting his campaign by saying like Mexicans are
Michelle?
peepers?
Well, number one,
like,
Michelle would have kicked his ass. Like there wouldn't have been any question. But yeah,
and that's the thing, is that like Black people, like, oh my goodness, Black women especially in like professional spaces, impossibly perfect standard that we have to hold ourselves to. But like you have people who are just mediocre, just nice guys who get a pass on so much else. And that
aren't nice guys
hurts. It
and
sucks.
get a pass.
Yeah.
And that goes in any field. That goes in sports, that goes in music, that goes in politics, that goes anything social, period. Like if it goes back to that quote of if you're Black or a person of color, you have to not be mediocre. You have to be damn near the point fucking magical to just get half of what your white brothers and sisters have.
You got to work twice as hard to get half as far.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I call it the Apollo effect. Like first, like when black people support you, that's when you get picked up. If black people don't fuck with you, it's like getting booed off at the Apollo.
Yeah.
So you can't be mediocre black people, because all the stuff that we've been through, you don't want to be that letdown or that mediocre.
Yes.
Black, you know, because the bar is set so high, and then there's another level you have to get to just to cross over to the quote unquote mainstream. Because we don't really we innovate the mainstream. We are the trendsetters, but when it comes to like the financial side of things, making money, we don't benefit from that. I.e., TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, I did want to bring up the Black Panthers. Talk about policing, because a lot of people don't understand the Black Panthers, but I think we're kind of past that right now. But for the international listeners, sorry if I'm doing the whole if I'm taking over, I'm sorry. But for the international listeners, please learn about Huey P. Newton, right? The Black Panthers, because they were considered a terrorist group when they really wasn't, because they actually were protecting low-income communities and like from the police, and actually these communities were improving because they made sure the children were fed throughout the day.
They started social programs. Yeah.
Right. They started WIC. Like,
they,
like people don't know this. And also, like, after the Black Panthers disbanded, they still stayed. I mean, hell, there were even different racial divisions of the Black Panthers. There were like an Asian division of the Black Panthers. So, like, a lot of people don't know this because, again, with covert racism through law, they considered the Black Panthers a terrorist organization when they really weren't. They were just trying to better their communities.
I believe the Asian chapter of the Black Panthers, I think they called themselves the Yellow Peril.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
And now I'm noticing that a lot of Asian Twitter that's in solidarity of Black Lives Matter, they're now using that hashtag, the Yellow Peril. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And what's crazy is after the Black Panthers disbanded, they formed two groups, the Crips and the Bloods. And the Crips and the Bloods used to have an acronym, and I forgot what it was. I know one is creating something, creating resistance in progress or something like that. You need to look up the act. There's a YouTube video out that talks about the history of the Crips and the Bloods and how it was from the Black Panthers. The Crips and the Bloods were originally there to protect the Black neighborhoods until the government decided to basically drop drugs into the Black community all in the 1980s with the crack epidemic. So it's just like people don't realize how deep this is, and when you talk about these subjects, like I said, it's like a whole can of worms that have been suppressed. So when you want to talk about it, it's instant. It's instant overload. It's an instant overload of information, and it's either you just it's so crazy that you don't want to believe it, or you just feel so horrible, especially if you're a white person that wants to learn. You just feel so horrible that people that look like you put Black people through these things. So I'm just like, and I have a quote that I want to put on a shirt. So please don't steal this idea, or if you want, please contact me. I have a shirt that says "Black in America equals beautiful nightmare." because
Mm.
we create so much. We fought in the front lines of so many wars. We're the first to speak up on any kind of injustice, no matter who you
Yes.
are. But we get
Mhm.
shit on every time when we need something that helps us. We get
Yes.
killed. We get lynched. We got burnt. We got all this going on. But people want to take from our positive side, but don't want to help our negative. So it's like being
Yes.
Black in America or anywhere in the world
Mm.
generally, because I mean, I've seen the racist commercials around the world, but being Black in America is a beautiful nightmare. You're living in the land of honey, but the people that don't like you make your life a nightmare. So that's
Mhm.
my, you know.
Yeah, and like, and how many times have like people said on Twitter, like, you know, Obama, like we need a we need a real president, or like, you know, Black women are so strong, or like, you know, that kind of thing, where it's always like the onus is on us to kind of like fix these deep systemic problems, and not
Uh-huh.
for, you know, like people in the dominant culture to get like educated about,
Yes.
you know, what this
we
is and
are doing
what they
all of
need
the
to do.
emotional labor. We're doing
Right.
all of the emotional
All the
labor.
emotion. Mhm.
And so
Yes.
like there was a guy back a little while ago, like an hour ago, who I think had a question about how America is supposed to get better, or racism in America is supposed to get better with somebody like President Trump. And I think without really addressing, like, I don't think America has really addressed its racism issue, like how fundamental it is to the nation's history and
Yes.
so many of its institutions. And until we reckon with that, I don't see it getting better, right? And the way that happens is for white people to learn how to be uncomfortable with this,
Yes.
right? This is I I definitely sympathize that this is an uncomfortable thing. When I had to learn about, like, you know, my privilege as a man, right? And what women
Mhm.
have to go through every day that I just am not aware of, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's uncomfortable for me, because
Yeah.
now once I see it, I see all these ways, and big and small, that I've contributed to it in the past. And
Yeah.
it just makes me feel sick knowing that, like, in my ignorance, I've made women uncomfortable or made them like feel othered. But like, I have to absorb that and
Yeah.
use that as fuel to get better. And so, like, what we're asking white allies to do is to learn how to be uncomfortable. You will, I promise you, you will see something that you've done in the past or you've said in the past that might have been racist. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're a terrible person, or that you're racist, or that, like, you know, we want to kill you or anything like that. It just means that, like, we've all been bathing in this for so long,
Yes.
and all of us are complicit in it.
Mm.
And we have to
Mhm.
sit with our complicity, recognize it, and use that to learn how to be better.
Yep.
But until we
There.
do that, until each
Mhm.
and every one of us does that work, it's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
There's a T-shirt that I see people wearing now, and it says, I'm probably going to get this quote wrong, but it said that racism is so much a part of America that when you fight against it, you're considered anti-American.
Yes, I see that.
And I was just like, that blew my mind. And also to the your point of how um or either Witchy's point, where I just saw a documentary on Black people in the horror genre, horror noir, and I really would love for people to watch this documentary. And they base one of the people who, it comes from a book by a doctor, I think Reed, and it was adapted into a documentary by Tananarive Due and several others. And Tananarive Due is a Black horror writer, and it based one of the quotes that Miss Due said was the fact that Black history is Black horror.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I put both that T-shirt that says racism is so much America that if you fight against it, it's anti-American, and Black history is Black horror, it puts all of what you and what you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fact.
Yeah, and like I think that's one of the reasons why like Tananarive Due has been like doing this in book form for a long time. Her short stories are amazing. She has
Yes.
a short film called like a Danger Word, I think, that I got to see during a Worldcon when it was in San Jose.
Nice.
She's amazing.
Yes.
But like Jordan Peele has been able to find
Yes.
ways to make the Black experience an allegory for horror. So things
Yes.
like Us and Get Out, are incredibly Black movies, right? Because they speak directly to Black experience in
Why
all
they're
these different ways,
terrifying, honestly.
Oh
right?
yes.
Um, and I love the idea of Jordan Peele kind of like watching the audience and saying like the Black people in the audience and the white people in the audience were watching like two different movies up until a certain point, and then like once that like kind of third act twist happens, then everybody's on the same page. And
Yes.
Yeah.
it's a really interesting experience to watch audiences go through that. But
Le-
stuff like Candyman, like
oh,
super
oh,
Black, it's great.
I'm sorry, let me make a correction on something that I said. The documentary Horror Noir is by Dr. Robin R. Means Coleman. And her book that the documentary is based on is called Horror Noir: Blacks in American Horror Films from the 1890s to the present. So it basically went, it went from the 1890s to the 2000s. And so it's almost a little over 100 years of how Blacks have been portrayed in the horror genre as versus then and versus now. And it's filmmakers, it's actors. Tony Todd, who played Candyman, is in the documentary, and it's the actor from The Craft. It's so many. It's the actors, the filmmakers, those that became inspired as little kids, as Black kids, by the horror that they saw as kids, and then they became filmmakers later on. They also spoke to Jordan Peele. Tananarive Due is in it, and as well as Dr. Coleman, who the documentary is based on. I just wanted to it's based on her book. I just wanted to make that correction.
All right, thanks for that. And I put up a link in the chat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be putting a large amount of these links out on the original what's the word, on the upload when we get there. But yeah, so just send them through when we get to that point as well.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez. Suddenly I'm the one talking. How does this? Actually, there was something that I did want to speak to, and it had to do with just how exactly, because I mean, I know that this is going to be part of the conversation around it as well. Like when we're talking about things like hashtags like all cops are bad. Specifically, there are people out there, and I know who has taken some offense to it, even though I don't know how to actually sort of like what's the word?
No, I get
Yeah.
it.
Mm-hmm.
I
So-
think the first thing, it's
Yes.
about the system.
Mhm.
It's about the fact that all cops are ACAB, all cops are bastards. is not an indictment of every single individual cop, though it is an indictment of most of them. What it's an indictment of is the fact that the system is set up to allow cops to brutalize people, and those that try to stand up against it are either forced out or otherwise targeted themselves. It is set up
True.
so that the cops are incentivized to protect their own in these cases
Yes.
and to allow it to
Mhm.
continue.
The
So
blue
not
line.
every individual cop is a bastard. There are many, many cops who are good people who entered the force for the right reason or trying to do the right thing. But the fact that they will not or cannot, for fear of retaliation, speak up
Yes.
against injustices and
Mhm.
stop it and change it is why all cops are bastards.
Right.
Mhm.
And like
Church.
and I try very hard not to use like those personal attacks, because like, one of my best friends had, his father was uh a very high ranking person in a big city police department for a number of years. And
Mhm.
he's a great person. But when you take a look at, just the system of criminal justice, and you take a look at the history, especially of like police departments and how they were used to subjugate minority populations, specifically Black people,
Mhm.
um, you have to recognize that like that inequality of justice has been baked into the system from the very beginning, and we've
Mhm.
never fully reckoned with it. We've never fully rooted it out. And
Mhm.
cops who want to be good, and there are people who do want to do the the right thing. They don't have the resources or the support to do it. The system does not allow them to actually be good cops,
Yes.
because if they start turning on their own, or they start talking about abuses within the department, how quickly are they going to be, uh, punished for that?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
And this
Or
isn't
or
So
just like
they'll
administratively. This is like accidental crossfire type of shit
Mhm.
if you're loud enough.
mhm.
right. Like
Yep.
they'll find ways to just make it seem like, uh, yeah, this cop imploded on himself after he called out, this crooked cop. They'll find ways to make you look bad. You know,
Yes.
like it's like people don't realize. Again, it's a super super deep topic that doesn't have to be deep, but for almost centuries of basically ignoring the problem, it became a deep issue because it picked up so many other issues within the subject that it's just, oh, you want to talk about police brutality? All right, well, let's date back to slave patrol and then go on from there. And that's over
Mhm.
200 years of
Yep.
that. Like we ain't got all the answers, Sway. That's all I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Uh,
but and that's also like, I just want to keep rounding around to defunding the police, because what we're talking about, like with all cops are bastards and defund the police, is not that like every cop is evil and needs to be at their job. It's that like the system does not allow them to actually serve the needs of the public in the way that they should be. And
Mhm.
we need to dismantle that system completely and rethink it. And we can do that. We need more social workers. We need people who are trained in de-escalation. We need people who are whose purpose it is to get at the root of the issue, instead of just arresting people and throwing them in prison, which doesn't
Mhm.
rehabilitate them. It just makes them
No.
like hardened criminals. It makes them more terrible.
Yep.
So the whole system of criminal justice is unequal, and it
Yeah.
needs to be completely rethought. So when people say like all cops are bastards, or defund the police, or abolish the police, that this is what we're talking about. Like, it's never really
Yep.
served us. It
Mhm.
hasn't. It wasn't created to
No.
serve us. So why don't we take the time to create something that's supposed to serve all people equally? It's time.
Yep.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize, like, the whole Black Lives Matter thing is literally the whole, like, people that say all lives matter is missing the point when we're trying to, again, like, help everybody. It's not just
Yes.
us, you know. So it's just exhausting to have to constantly explain, like, Black
Yeah.
Lives Matter isn't, Black Lives Matter only. We're just letting you
Yeah.
know that, hey, we're here. We matter too. Like, let's, we're trying to get everything done equally. It's just right now we are in a position where we're getting killed at a disproportionate rate.
Yeah.
So, like, we matter. Like, we have the receipts of how much we've contributed to society. Why are you still killing us? Like, they
Yeah.
just don't want to hear us. Hence why we have these protests, because we tried to go with Colin Kaepernick.
Oh my God, Kaepernick.
Oh.
He was
I love when they never apologize to him.
right.
Yeah. Right.
And he was called like a son of a bitch or something like that. And then LeBron James talked about the school he was going to open, and someone told him to shut up and dribble. And then later, someone put the N word on one of his house garages. It was just like,
Wow.
I don't know if you heard this song by Jay-Z,
Mm-hmm.
but the song by Jay-Z is called the Story of OJ, and he's the intro of the song is called, it's just like, well, I'm not going to say the chorus because I don't know if you're going to censor it, but basically, no matter how high in society you get as a Black person, you're still considered an N-word to people if you
Yes.
don't,
Yep.
Mhm.
it shouldn't be like that. And that's why we're saying Black Lives Matter, is because we're trying to contribute to society, but you still see us as an ignorant Black person.
Like
That's the thing. We're just trying to live.
And-
We're
Yeah,
just
and-
trying to.
Exactly.
We're just trying to be ourselves. We're just trying to live our lives. We're just trying to be a
And-
part of society and be a part and contribute. And we're not looking to get back. We're not looking for revenge. We're just looking to be treated the exact same way and be allowed to live. That's
The
literally
thing-
all we want.
And going and going back to the point that that Teddy was saying about the police, and how also I get so angry. It's true. We don't want revenge. We don't want vengeance. We want we want to we want to live and thrive. And it angers me that whenever Black people bring up something that other people seem to take for granted and said, but we need this too. We want this too. We desire this, which every human being has, wants, needs, and suddenly, because it's coming from a Black person, we're suddenly told, no, you can't have that, no, it can't be that way. Like the thing with the police, I was explaining how the police system is so reprehensibly oppressive to Black people, to Black communities. And I had somebody say to me, I had a student who actually said to me and got angry and said, well, my uncle is a cop, and this or I possibly was retired or whatever, and was angry and said, what about his feelings? And I said, what about Black people's lives?
Right.
This is the thing
They always got to make it about an individual. Like,
with an individual. And I'm like saying, I'm sure I had to say, I'm sure your uncle was probably a good cop. My point is, what does his feelings have to do with me trying to stay alive when I encounter a police? You won't be, you'll get probably a stern talking to. I could be dead. And it's just so frustrating that people are always told, well, you need to ask for this, you need to reach for it and get it, and then when we do, we're suddenly told, well, no, you can't have it, or you're denied it, or what about my feelings? No, sorry, your feelings are irrelevant when they are hurting me, because and when they're putting me and others that look like me in danger. Somebody made that quote where they said that oh, it was a Baldwin quote, and I'm gonna probably get dragged by the Black scholars for messing this up. But he basically he I'm just gonna paraphrase, where he basically said that um you and I can disagree, and we can still come together. But if your beliefs hurt me, now, in other words, there's a problem. And I know I'm going to get probably dragged by Black academia because I totally messed that up. But that's basically what he was saying. Whenever we want and need and desire something that everybody else, that as a human being, this is what it is about being alive. Suddenly now, when it's coming from a Black body, now there's a problem.
Right.
And there's a saying going around on Twitter, or a tweet going around on Twitter, I should say, where it basically is, instead of saying, "Oh, well, it's terrible that Black people are getting killed, but why is so much property getting destroyed?" Instead, say, "Oh, well, it's terrible that so much property is getting destroyed, but why are Black people getting killed?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny. Like, it wasn't till I started traveling, like, I think it was 2015 that I realized my fear for the police. Um,
Mm,
the first time it happened was when my mom just got her new truck.
mm,
It was a Mazda. It's a Mazda CX-9, so it's kind of like a sportsy slash luxury kind of like truck. And
mm,
we got pulled over because my mom haven't she hasn't gotten her new tag at that time. She didn't get her new tags yet, so she was on temporary tags, and she got pulled over. And I'm glad this happened on a Sunday, because we were just getting out of church, so we were dressed up. But
mm.
like, my mom noticed that I was starting to freak out, like, because of like the recent, police thefts that were going on. On top of that, we just dealt with the whole Freddie Gray situation.
Oh.
So I was like, look, I I was just I couldn't describe how I was feeling, because as a child I would have panic or anxiety attacks because I
Mhm.
was just stupidly shy and things like that. And that feeling came back, and my mom was just like, it's just a policeman. Like, he was nice. He did. And my mom didn't understand until she saw other things that happened. And
Yes.
then get to 2016. I was in Mexico, hanging out with some friends, and I think we went to an Applebee's, and we were at Applebee's waiting for our food, and then I see in the distance, the police, and I was still talking. I felt I was still talking, but then my friend was like, "Yo, Teddy, why are you like so low in your chair right now? Like, are you okay?" Like, and
Wow.
then and then I noticed that my body automatically
Mm,
assumed the basically hide, just to hide, even though I felt normal, but my body clammed up and started to hide in
mhm.
my seat because I saw the police talking to other people. Um, and it made me more realize that I just had an absolute fear of police. And then again, it happened again in Spain in 2018.
Mm,
I did the same thing, and I had to explain to my Spaniard friend, and once we got to his house, that, like, look, this is the second time this happened, because I didn't mention the first police altercation, but I told him this is the second time this happened because of X, Y, and Z. And he didn't believe me, because I mean, he lives in Spain. The
mhm.
police are completely different in Spain. And I'm just like, look, I mean, you can take as you want, but this is what's going on. Me being Black, if I can't interact with the police because that's kind of like an instant death sentence. Unless I know the policeman personally or they're relatives of mine, because I think I have maybe one or two relatives that are in the police, one of which is like a chief. But I digress. My friend was like struggling with understanding what was going on until we had another friend from the States who was white, and he confirmed everything that I said. He confirmed everything. You know, he didn't look at it as a white guy telling him, "Oh no, I'm white. This is what's going on." He looked at it as, "Oh, this is another American talking about police issues. I should take this seriously." Because in fact he made a tweet about it. He's like, "Yeah, my friend, you know," he didn't mention my name. He's like, "Yeah, my friend is like usually a really big guy. He's a loud personality, but I've never seen him go so quiet once he saw the police. Like it opened his eyes to a lot of things." And it's just, people don't realize how, like, even though we give this Black Americans are stereotyped to be very, very strong, very, very boisterous people. We're very proud of ourselves. Like, well, if you meet the proper Black people, yes. But when it comes to police, we just do not. The trust is gone. Period. And now I'm just grateful that the world is seeing it. Because they're seeing how they're reacting to protesters, which are people from all walks of life. Like, I don't know if you saw that Marvel parody of when Captain America's worn out and it says protester on his chest, and then all of a sudden everybody from Wakanda comes through the portal that says donators, petitioners, and all these kinds of people came to help. Like, that's what's going on. And the fact that police are tear gassing protesters from all walks of life, they're not, the police is not helping their case of being the good guy.
Like that thing in Buffalo actually just jacked me up pretty bad. Like, because I don't know if people saw this, but it's a bunch of police officers kind of like walking down the line, like the curfew starts, and so like they're kind of walking. And there's this old guy that comes up to one of the policemen, and they just push him down. And since he has his hands full, you know, his head just hits the pavement and just bounces off, and then he just starts bleeding. And it's so shocking to me that like there's so many people who are there and like just let it happen. Like, it's possible that like they didn't touch him because you're not supposed to move someone with a head injury, and that's like good practice. But just the fact that like police all over the country, there's like a Twitter thread of like 400 documented abuses of police power in through protests and queer periods, like just in the past like 10 days. And if you think about how many of these aren't being caught on video, aren't being caught by phones, where all people have to go on are the word of the police officers and minorities.
They're even stopping EMTs and ambulance people from treating the people who become their victims. There was even a doctor that had put up a medic tent, and the police tore it down. They tore it down. And I think there's at least 2 videos of either that incident as well as another one, which I can't remember which cities these happened in. So yeah, I even tweeted what you just said, that they're not making their case. I said, you want people to believe that you're the good guys, and yet you're now other people of other walks of life and other skin colors are now getting tear gas, getting beaten up, getting hurt, and now they're seeing and getting a taste of what the Black community has been saying, you know, all this time. Yeah, they're even keeping the EMTs from treating people, or the medical people who put up tents for the protesters. Police have come in and tear down these tents and take and confiscate the medical equipment.
I want to say though that it's an indictment of white supremacy that it took this happening to white people for them to believe the black people that this was happening in our communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, because
Yes.
they had proof over 30 years ago via the Rodney King beating, but it was always the same question. And holy crap, 30 years ago, I was just oh my god. But but it was always white people always were like, well, what did he do? Was he complying? Was he? I'm just like, it's a dude that got beat up damn near to death, and you're asking, you're trying to play lawyer, asking.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like, dude, it's another life on deck here. Like, come on now, are you serious?
Yeah.
You
They're already bringing up the George Floyd at one point with what medicine he had in his system, and I'm like, I don't care if he had pre-existing conditions and everything like that. The fact of the matter is, anybody is going to die when the knee is on a neck. There's only magical Negroes in the movies and TV shows and books. We're not magical in real life. We're going to die the same way everybody else does.
But it proves the point of like they don't want black people to go to court. They just want to be the judge, jury, and executioner.
Yes.
You know? And the fact that people are defending that is like they don't realize how messed up that is. Like like the law says everybody has a chance for a fair trial or something like that. But since I'm black, I'm not good enough to get a fair trial. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the worst part about like all of these like extrajudicial killings by the police are how the media and say the court of public opinion actually goes and like kind of does this weird post-death assassination of character for all these people.
I think there's a Netflix special on that.
Right. So like it's like with George Floyd and like David McAddy, he they were like, oh well, he actually did have a gun or like that, or like Tony McDade, the trans black person that was killed in Tallahassee. Like this happens again and again and again. So like we're never
to make your point. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this comedian named Zach Fott. He has this song called "I Got Depression" or whatever. However, he made a tweet years ago before Twitter decided to get rid of his account because Twitter is known to be racist as well. But he's like, every time every time a white person kills their entire family, they'll try to paint them in a positive light, and they show a picture of a man that actually killed his family riding a water like a sea-doo, like a waterboard thing. This is like it's like every time someone black gets murdered, they try to find the mug shots or make them look as quote unquote urban as possible. But when it's someone white, they try to
humanize them.
Yeah, they try to humanize them to add sympathy. Like, oh, he was just a lone wolf. Or he was going through hell in life.
They bring up the yearbook picture. Oh, somebody made a joke about that. They said they bring up the white person's yearbook picture, and I'm like, but then when it comes to the black person, now they bring up the quote unquote mug shot or anything that remotely looks like a mug shot. So
CCTV footage or something.
Yeah.
It's just people be wilding.
So
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we're I think about 10 minutes. So what we want to actually kind of do is maybe just 2 to 3 minutes to our various speakers to just sort of, if you have anything, closing remarks, shout outs, those kinds of things, to about, half past. And then, because I know that it's been a very, very long time for us to sort of be here 2.5 hours already almost. So I know that many of us probably just, I don't even know. We would continue this conversation, definitely. But I think we can, just maybe just start wrapping up for this section. I think we're definitely going to continue with this conversation, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know how we want to order this. Witchy, I guess maybe just start us off, Teddy. Then, goodness, I've got Kayfabe.
Okay.
Yes.
So
And then
the
Jacob.
only thing I really want to say to everyone listening is you need to stop and listen to the Black people in your life. You need to stop and listen to the queer people in your life, to the minorities in your life, to the oppressed in your life about what's going on. And that is whether I know right now we're focusing on, the BLM movement, but just as an overall, that is whether or not you are Black, you are white. You need to listen and realize the oppression that people are going through. But especially at this time, listen to your Black friends. This is not about politics. This is not about drama. This is about our lives. And if you value us as friends, if you want to keep us around, listen to us so that we can be around for years to come.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what was just said 100%. On top of that, like when we say listen, we're not here to debate. We're here to share our experiences. Like, I shouldn't have to feel like I have to prepare a dissertation or a fucking TED talk to prove my experience. This, like, if you want to know more or you want official sources, like I mentioned in the beginning of this interview, like talk to historians, go to historic historically Black colleges and universities. If you're in America, if you're from other countries, Google historically Black community colleges and universities such as Howard University in Washington D.C., Morehouse, I think in Atlanta, Morgan State University here in Baltimore. There's so many historically Black community colleges and things like that you should be able to discover Black history yourself and learn how beautiful yet nightmarish it is. So if you have Black friends, do cherish them, but don't use them as a token for, oh, I have a Black friend, or think you know everything about Black history because you have Black friends and things like that. And we didn't even talk about the fetish side. We kept that out. But yeah, like legit 100% listen to people's Black people's experiences, and you will learn so much more instead of trying to be like, well, what about this, and pull out graphs that are originally designed against Black people in the first place. But yeah, that's all I have to say, and I appreciate this talk, and hopefully we can have another conversation. All right, I'm done.
Okay.
Oh, my turn?
Yeah. I don't know whose turn it is.
Oh, yeah. So, what my fellow panelists have said. Stop interjecting. Stop saying, "Oh, well, I've had this experience." This is the time to listen to people now. This is the time to listen to Black people. You listen to us in pop culture. You listen to us as the guru or the wise man or woman or the shaman or something in these movies. But yet, when we're now trying to tell you this is what's happening, now you want to interject. Now you want to interrupt. Now you want to dismiss a race by saying, oh, well, something similar happened to me. No, it did not. No, it did not. And your feelings are going to be hurt, and that's how people grow. You have to learn that when you say that you're a friend, when people give you the title of ally, that now you need to interact in appropriately, in that if you say I'm your friend, if you say that you are considered a supporter and an ally, that you then now need to listen to me when I then tell you these things, when other Black people tell you these things, and not come to us when you have an issue with another Black person, and then you want to come and say to the other Black person, I had an issue like this. No, then you talk to that person and say what you feel, but only after you have listened to what they have had to say and what I have to say and what other Black people have to say. All right, so I'm going to stop now.
Right, and then finally,
Jacoby?
Jacoby.
All right. Well, so first, I just want to thank you, Ivik. Is that
Yeah.
how you pronounce your name?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. For providing us with this platform, allowing us to just talk for 2.5 hours about our experiences in the furry community and just as Black people. It's really great of you to amplify our voices this way, and I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody in the audience and the live chat for taking time out of their Sunday to listen to us. It's really important that we have these conversations. I appreciate it, that you guys are listening. I know that none of this is easy, right? A lot of people are just kind of becoming aware of a lot of this stuff, and it can be really difficult to know what to say or what to do. So I just wanted to take some time out to acknowledge that as well, and say, you know, it's hard, but it's worth doing. And the people who are out there kind of like doing the work, who are taking time to sit with their discomfort and learn and listen, we really appreciate that too. So my name is Jacoby. My Twitter handle is Jacoby, and you can read my writing on jacoby.com. That's all the plugging I'll be doing. But thanks a lot,
Dang,
guys.
I forgot to plug myself.
Yeah,
Shoot.
plug.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Plug her in.
I actively chose not to, but
Yeah, that's all right. Up to y'all.
I,
Hey, who wants to plug first? Because I don't mind.
go ahead and
Huh?
plug.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and plug myself. All right. So my name is Teddy, or on my Twitter, I'm Teddy Winton. I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Swaying Hill. I post drum videos. I'm a professional freelance musician. I play drums. I also have a coffee page under the same name, Swaying Hill. And yeah, my Twitter is at Teddy Winton, simply enough. And yeah, go ahead and follow me. I talk about, PLC issues as well as music things and art and stuff. Boom. All right.
You're gonna
That's-
actually make me say something. So
Yeah.
fine. So my Twitter is at Witchy Bunny, spelled as it is on the placard. I am a staff member at Anthrocon. I am assistant director of the dealers room there. I am also a fiber artist, and I own and run Magic Rabbit Fiber Arts. So you want to find me, Witchy Bunny on Twitter. That's pretty much it.
Oh, can I do one more plug real quick? I'm sorry. I forgot to mention, if you want to check out my drumming, you hear my drumming on Pepper Coyote's Blast Radius album. You can hear me on the BLFC musical soundtrack, and also I'm working on a potential orchestra project with Eludi. So yeah, just go ahead, check it out. It's cool stuff. I also work with Fox and More on and off. So if you've seen Foxes and Peppers at any cons on the coast or at Eurofurence,
Nice.
chances are I was on drum. So
Nice.
I'm done now.
Nice. All right.
Oh wait, I just want to say the art for the Blast Radius album was also done by a queer person. Just saying, not me,
Yeah.
someone else.
Nice.
All right, K-Faye?
Okay. Okay. So I'm Kayfay. I'm on Twitter at Kayfay, Kayfey. I also have a website. It's turning 14 years old this year. It's Tabber the Red. It's named after one of my red tabby cat warriors from a set of cat fantasies that I have published. So it's Tabber the Red, TABBERTHERED.com, .org, and .net. So I made sure that I bought all 3 domains.
Nice.
And and like I said, I did an overhaul of it last year. So now my website is optimized for all mobile devices. So I also have a blog where a lot of what I've talked about it's http:// inprettyprint.blogspot.com, and this is where I just basically give news about any projects that I'm working on. I talk about my favorite artists, favorite writers, that sort of thing, and just about life experiences and project. I'm also on DeviantArt as Copper Sphinx, CopperSphinx, and I'm also Copper Sphinx with a Y on my Furry Writers Guild page. So if you want to find me and see what artwork I'm doing, some of my professional stuff, some of my amateur stuff is on DeviantArt, coppersphinx.deviantart.com. Now I have a new extension on Instagram, and that's hand drawn by Carmen Jr., because that's my actual name, Carmen. And that's where I put a lot of my progressions and also drafts of projects that I'm working on. Plus, I also put up short videos of book reviews and things, and I attach all of this to my blogs and everything. Also, one last pitch, where you can find all of my publications and everything that I've had published up till now is on a WordPress blog, The Angry Goblin, because I am a lot of times ranting and raving on Twitter. So I decided to give myself that name. TheAngryGoblin.wordpress.com, and that's where all of my publications are, including my 2 recent science fiction non-furry short stories. One is called The Human Network. It was published by Kyanite Press, which is by Kyanite Publishing, and its sequel is Catching Fields, and also in Kyanite Press. All of these links are available on theangrygoblin.wordpress.com, and everything is attached to tabberthered.com, .org, and .net, so you don't have to be Googling me. Everything is there on the website. Again, I'm also on Twitter at Kayfay, so you can find all of what I just said in my pinned tweet. And I am done. And I want to thank all of you for I just want to thank Ivik for this opportunity again, as well as my fellow panelists. You're all awesome, and I already follow some of you and your work, and I am just so impressed to be a part of so many amazing and creative people. All right, I'll stop now before I start crying.
You're too kind. But thank you.
Do we have one more, or am I?
No, we're good.
We good?
Well, I was gonna plug one more thing, but
Okay.
I'm just check out the Wear Project. It's a comic series
Yes.
that kind of talks about issues. Basically, I'm not trying to spill too much, but my persona. Oh, I'll just say my persona and other characters are involved in this series. But please check it out. It's an ongoing series right now, and it's created by Nuxlight. And yeah, I just wanted to plug that out there because I'm a part of it, and I'm really grateful that he's using his platform to talk about social injustices through his comic.
Nice.
So, that's my last plug. I swear. All right.
All right. Well, from our side, thank you very much for joining us on this wild ride. Honestly,
Yeah.
it was.
It's
Mhm.
been an absolute pleasure having you guys,
Yeah.
and incredibly insightful hearing what you guys have to say and learning from your
For
experiences.
having us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just for those of you who are still listening, we do tend to play music directly after this. Most of it is relatively metal orientated, a little bit more, rocky as well. So for those of you who are listening, stick around. We'll be here for the next, is that hour and a half?
Yeah.
2 hours? Yeah, hour and a half,
Mhm.
all the way to midnight our time. So yeah, just stick around. We'll definitely be sort of rocking into the next part of the day, at least from our side. But yes, thank you all for joining us again. We do really appreciate this, and we really should have this conversation more often.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking forward to whatever works coming from here.
Mhm.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody. We'll,
Thank you.
we'll see you again soon.
Take
Thank you.
care, guys.
I'm
Bye.
gonna go eat
Take
lunch
care,
now.
everyone. Stay
Have a good
safe.
evening. Cheers, everybody.
All right.
I think
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Wait.